will give you a good overview. And the meeting is being recorded so that if you have to leave early, you'll be able to find it. We'll let you know in an email where it can be found on YouTube. But Bob Madden produced the photographs for more than 20 stories for National Geographic and for several National Geographic books. He's traveled across all 7 continents and seen a diversity of cultures and customs, from the Yanomamo Indians in the rainforest of Venezuela to street life in Brooklyn, to the ecology of Chesapeake Bay, where he lives, and of the area he calls home. He's also been immersed in photography from another perspective as senior assistant editor and director of layout and design at National Geographic Magazine, and also picture editor for the National Geographic Kids magazine and National Geographic books. Bob was instrumental in developing the National Geographic Digital Photography Archive and was on their website launch team. He designs trade books such as Madagascar, A World Out of Time, and he did one on Sam Ebel, who was one of our last speakers. His long list of awards and credits include Magazine Photographer of the Year, which he won twice, College Photographer of the Year, and he's got all sorts of designs. I won't read you his long list. But as a Midwesterner, he graduated from the University of Wisconsin in Platteville with a Bachelor of Science and I guess minor in English and history, and studied photojournalism in graduate school at the University of Missouri. But he's going to talk to us tonight about how he puts together the plan for his assignment for photographing for National Geographic. So with that, take it away, Bob.
Well, thank you very much. A little housekeeping here when we first start. I'd like to have everybody stay on mute if we can. And then during the presentation, you'll see we'll open it up and we'll ask questions in different parts of the program. But I'd just like to keep everybody on mute while we're going through the first few parts of what we're doing here tonight. I'm going to share my screen, see if I can find it. Let me find my screen here that I want to share. Hang on. Here it is. It's this one here. There we go. And I'm going to go try to share that with you all through Zoom. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Where am I here? Get down to the bottom. Here we go. Share screen. And this is the one I want to share right here. And share it. Okay. I'll just put up the first screen. Now it looks like a black screen, right? We're all set here. So if you're all on mute, we'll start the program. So I call this particular piece Cuba Slice of Life. And what I'm going to do today is I'm not going to talk about Cuba necessarily. What I'm going to talk about is photojournalism. And I'm going to use Cuba as a way to show you how we work at National Geographic, how we organize ourselves, and how we actually go out and take the photographs. So I call it a slice of life. I wasn't there for a long time, and we'll talk about that in a minute. This is probably the most dense screen you're going to see. You can read this, but what I'm actually hoping you read is that it says that we are working with a rigid ethical framework, and we also have to make decisions instantly because we don't set anything up. And because we don't set any pictures up, we have to take what's there. It's always very interesting when we come back from an assignment from Geographic and we're on the plane and the photographers are always saying, "Phew, man, that was quite the assignment, wasn't it?" And the writers are going, because they haven't written anything yet. They're just kind of waiting to get started. And so the photographers are done. They have to deal with what's out there and at the moment. All right, so here's me in Cuba. And I'm with my prime camera that I'm using. As you can see, it's a Canon, and I've moved from the DSLR now to the digital side, but I'm sorry, the mirrorless side. But this is more or less what I used all the time. It's a prime lens, not a prime lens. It's a kit lens, um, and it's basically the lens that pretty much everybody uses with what you get. And I find that a lot of my pictures, maybe 85% of them, are with that. Um, and the other thing is I find out that if you see on my belt there, you can see my cell phone. Well, the interesting thing about the cell phone is the fact that I downloaded all the maps of Cuba, so I hopefully wouldn't get lost. I could find anything that I needed while I was using that. So it was also I was able to use Google Translate if I needed to, as we'll talk about that in a minute. But everybody in Cuba speaks Spanish, not much English going there at all. Okay, so here's the tip of Florida up on the top of the screen you see there. And then you can see where Cuba is. It's about 277 miles long. You can see here the topography of it, which helps a little bit, but it's not very far away. And it's one of the things I use for research. What I try to do when I start a story is I do the intellectual research. I look at a lot of things that have to do with the country intellectually, not visually. And in fact, very interestingly, I rarely look at any photographs that anybody else has took of Cuba because I want to take my own. I don't want to copy what they're doing. I want to see what I did. All right, so I was only there for a short period of time, but you can see the Havana up here in the middle, and then you can see that I moved from Havana to Vinales, and then also down to Trinidad. In the short time I was there, even at that, it was almost 2.5 days of travel. So you always have to figure that travel in when you're going to be taking pictures. And one of the issues is that Cuba, over the years, has, let me just grab some things that just fell. Um, Cuba, over the years, has been dependent on sugar. In fact, one of the stories that was done in the National Geographic in the 1950s was called Cuba, and then the subtitle was called America's Sugar Bowl. Well, that's what was happening before the revolution. 87% or so of the land um, was owned by about 6% of the people. And this is the big sugar valley that's near colonial, near the colonial Trinidad, and it actually funded Trinidad to a fairly good lifestyle for over 4 centuries. When I was there, it wasn't the harvest season, but even at that, about 90% of the harvest is done via machines nowadays. Now, this is a very interesting person here. This is um, a helper that came with me, and let's see if I can find her name here. Anyway, she was a main contact of David Harvey, who had done 2 books in Cuba and worked for National Geographic, and he gave me her name, and I must have exchanged 50 emails with her to figure out what I could do and what I couldn't do and where I could go. Very important to have that happen, because once you're on the ground, you want to start shooting. You don't want to deal with, all of these issues. She's a photographer in her own right, and she was on her way to Spain to set up an exhibit the next day. So I was very fortunate to be able to talk to her and help, and she helped me. I'll tell you how she helped me in a moment. I also read a lot. I read books. I read all kinds of books about Cuba, how the revolution happened, what happened in the past. Very important, because when you get on site, you get into a situation and you say, well, is this really important? Is this something I should be photographing? Well, if you've done the research, you know what you should be photographing. So what happens is then it the intellectual part is already done, and what you're doing is you're taking the craft of photography and applying it to whatever is out there. Again, you're not setting anything up, so you got to be at the ready all the time. Now, this is another thing I do. I go onto the website. I'm looking for all kinds of interesting information. What's the big export? Well, look, it's tobacco, obviously cigars. Um, so you think, well, Russia has been down there with the Bay of Pigs, and before that with the Cuban Missile Crisis. Well, Russia is not involved anymore since the overthrow of the Soviet Union. They hardly even deal with Cuba anymore. It used to be they would supply a lot of the oil cheap, and then they would get a lot of sugar and they'd pay a lot of money for it. Well, that doesn't happen anymore. What's interesting now, you find out the biggest export and import is Spain. Spain is very, very important for them. And if you look down here, the United States, they import 4% of their stuff from the United States, and they don't export anything to the United States. And we'll talk about why that happens. But this is really important to know before you actually go out and photograph in these countries or cities or wherever. Again, sugarcane is really big there, but it isn't really moving in any countries. China takes some of it, but still they have a real problem. I think they're down like something like from 11 million tons to like 4 million, 3 million tons now. So it's really changed. This is a man that you may know or not know, Jose Marti. He was actually, before Castro, was considered to be the leader of the Cuban independence movement, all during those times after the Spanish-American War, where Cubans lost the yoke of Spain, but of course then they gained the yoke of the United States. And he moved to New York, and he was a poet, and he died trying to get Cuba back into the role of independence from Spain, and he died in the Spanish-American War. One of the things that he's been known for is the lyrics for Guantanamera. You've all heard Guantanamera, the song. These are verses of Guantanamera, which he actually wrote as a poet. And in the second verse there, it says, "I cultivate a white rose." And of course, what that means is the white rose is independence. And so there's probably about 7 or 8 verses of Guantanamera, and it's kind of the national anthem now for Cuba. This is a very interesting place here. This is Parque Central, and in the background is El Capital, which was restored in 2013 by a guy named Senor El Cetilea. And after the fall of the Soviet Union, they're trying to figure out how we're going to make money. We got to make money now. We got to do something. And so they decided that tourism would be the way. So he restored this and a number of other places. What's interesting is that this capital here that you see is actually larger than the US Capitol. But they have some issues now because many of the buildings in Havana especially, and some other places, are great buildings. You can see the bones. If you look at this picture and a couple of more, you can see the bones, but you can see up on the roof, they got boards up in the roof. There's a tree growing on the roof, and they can't really afford to import enough materials to be able to restore these things. So they're falling down. I mean, literally every hurricane, every week, another one falls down. Here's one, though. It's been restored, the Gran Teatro de la Habana. There's a big theater inside. And, I couldn't go in there because it was government owned. And as I'll explain in a little bit, um, during the Trump regime and even now, you cannot go into government owned buildings according to your visa with the United States. They, they've had some wonderful places. This is in the National Ballet School, but other Cuban buildings such as the Gran Teatro and the Museum of the Revolution, which is the former presidential palace of Batista, they also have these kinds of ornate things that you're looking for. But again, look, you can see they really have some nice buildings. You can see that, but then they just take air conditioning units and stick them in there. That it's piecemeal of what they're doing. And again, they just can't afford to import any building materials for that, except if you go to a place called Colonial Trinidad. If you go to Colonial Trinidad, you'll see it's pristine, beautiful colors and all of that. And that's because Mr. Leal, again, felt that tourism would really help them out. And so what he did was he spent a lot of money in there, government money. I got them to spend it anyway. And he got them to put it on the national, it became an international a UNESCO site. So they get money from that, and they also are trying to keep it up for tourism. So tourism is a World Heritage Site for them. Get a lot of tourists. Here's one from China. This was before the pandemic. They were still, she was taking a picture. Again, all of these pictures that you see are not set up. These pictures, this is a grab shot of this lady taking a picture. Here's a tourist from Belgium. A lot of European tourists now that come, and not too many from the US. I probably spoke to maybe, I don't know, 10 people that spoke English in all the time that I was there. So now the Americans need to have a Cuban visa that pledges the support of the Cuban people. And you have to have a tourist card issued that you have to carry at all times. Now they don't check on you. They don't, nobody's following you, any of that. But the thing is that there is a situation where you're not supposed to stay in any government hotel or restaurant or anything. One of the restaurants you can stay in is a paladar, meaning taste in Spanish. And in the 1990s, they were having trouble making money in Cuba. And so what they did is they took about 10 different groups like tour buses, restaurants, certain restaurants, and they authorized them to have a private economic thing like a private enterprise. So this is a restaurant right here. But all the people in Cuba can't eat there. A big meal there is $12, and that's like twice as much money as most Cubans make in a month. Now you see where these guys are. Guys leaning back there, guy looking out here, lady sitting down the street. I didn't pose those people. I just waited until the right moment, and I got the right time to take the picture. Again, with these private enterprises, they can have these little kiosks that they sell things in. Here's Albert Corda's iconic photograph of Che Guevara. I don't think he ever made any money off this, unfortunately. But the T-shirts and keychains, and these kiosk owners have to pay a tax to be able to do this. And you also find that Che Guevara is also on the 3 peso banknote for Cuba. Again, the same picture. What's interesting now, though, it's unfortunate because the Cuban economy is really in such bad shape that 3 pesos in Cuba right now is worth 12 cents. Not a whole lot of money. There's a Cuban, um, it's called convertible Cuban currency called CUCs, which 1 CUC is equal to $1 US. But you can't use them outside Cuba, and you have to use them when you're inside Cuba. You can't use, well, you could use these pesos, but you'd have to have about 6 billion of them to make up a fair size piece of money. And then the other problem is that there are no ATMs there, and so you have to bring a lot of cash with you when you go, US cash. Um, Now, Castro's relationship to the U.S. after throwing Batista was was very different. Uh, After the Spanish-American War, Cuba was supposed to be an independent nation, and it immediately became a playground for U.S. Residents, casinos and brothels and mafia, um, all kinds of. They said there was a bag person that would leave the casinos every night and go over to Batista's house and give his wife, a bag full of money every night. Uh, so the problem with the U.S. had was the Castro took all of the land and gave it back to, well, didn't give it back, actually made it socialist land. Um, and so all of the people that were making a whole lot of money there that were Americans or Cubans that were in power left Cuba, and that's why we see a bunch of them in Miami and also in many other places in the United States. They left, and companies like Bacardi and other companies had to leave too. Um, so every place when you're there, whether it's a bus station or whatever, you see pictures of Castro and the revolution, and of course the Bay of Pigs and the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1961 and 62 had a lot to do with turning Cubans against the United States because of those invasions, and also the Cuban Missile Crisis situation with the United States. Um, so nowadays they have what they say called the CDR, as you can see there, a guy going by to sign a lot of signs for CDR. And what the CDR basically is like a neighborhood watch group, but it's not a watch group. It's like a bunch of snitches. So they snitch on all the local residents and tell the government what they're doing if they think they're doing something that's against the government. So most people don't like the CDR, but they know it exists. One of the interesting things is that when Castro came to power, there were 3 different kinds of groups, well, 4 actually, that became very interesting to Cubans. And two of them were sports. One of them was baseball. Excuse me just a second here. Randy Rosarena, who is a Tampa Bay slugger, actually is from Cuba, and he is very funny. He's works out of Tampa Bay as the Tampa Bay Rays, and he's only like about 350 miles from where he was born in Cuba, but he had to leave to be able to play there. Boxing is another. 20% of the athletes that in Cuba are boxers. And they have schools for both of those where you actually go and live in dormitories as 8-year-olds and train. And another one of the places that they do the same thing is the National Ballet School. And there's a photograph on the wall there of Fernando Alonso. He and his wife Alicia developed ballet techniques and were known all over the world for these techniques. And many of the Cuban women who start again at 8 years old and work through school there as ballerinas go off and dance on the world stage. Another thing that Castro was involved in was medicine. He wanted to have people that were trained in medicine, and trained many doctors who now work in many third world countries. This is a clinician that saw me with a camera and had one of his clients, and he posed for a picture. Um, but one of the problems they have is that the doctors only make like $66 a month, even if they're working in Cuba. This lady on the right here, Annabelle Aronacicibo, she's a doctor, and that's her father, who was a tobacco farmer. Well, she doesn't practice medicine anymore. She was our Airbnb host because she could make more in 2 nights in Airbnb than she could make an entire month working as a doctor. So it's very unfortunate that happens. The doctors that they go to third world countries, they're kind of their families are still in Cuba, so they don't defect at that point. So many things, of course, are very inexpensive for people that are there as tourists. Um, this is breakfast. This, as you can see, the spread with all kinds of meat and bread and biscuits and all kinds of things is $5. Um, it's very, very difficult to spend any money there. My entire trip there for I think 8 or 9 days, something like that, was $1,500, and that included the airfare from Baltimore. Um, Also, education was very big, and it has still been very big. This a man teaching his son math after school at his house. Again, this picture is not posed. Um, you find out that there's a little girl on the way to school. Um, Cuba is in the top 10 of literacy in the world. Something like 99.75% of Cubans are literate, um, and not in English, of course, just in Spanish. Um, you would meet these people, and you would say to them, "You're a North American," and I tell them in Spanish I came from North America, and you would think they'd say, "Oh gosh, help us out," or "Damn Yankee," or whatever. And most of the time, what they would say was, "Oh, I got an aunt in Tucson," or my sister's husband lives in Miami, or whatever. So they were trying to make connections. Very gracious people, I found. So these are young pioneers, and you notice they have these red kerchiefs. That's a trait of communists around the world. Russia used to do it, Vietnam used to do it, China used to do it. Uh, Vietnam still uses them sometimes, but not very often, just in some countries. But as you can see, um, they have blue ones too, but red ones are more prevalent. Also, the literacy has helped because they have newspapers now, and because of the newspapers, um, because people can read them, that's why they publish a lot of them. But the internet has really come on strong as well. You can get on Wi-Fi in many, many places in Cuba. And here's one, this is in Vanales, but uh, the kids are playing some kind of video game or something in the evening, and the mother is working on her email, or maybe it's the other way around. The kids are doing email, and the mother's doing the video game. But anyway, what you can do is you can get one of these, which is a, a place that you can buy them like 5 for $10 or something like that, and it gives you 5 hours of internet. Uh, and if you can find a place, most places like hotels, restaurants, and things have internet connection, which is interesting because you think that they're kind of a backward country, but not necessarily. Well, you all heard about these guys. This is this particular car is a personal car. You can tell because it's not all it's not completely worked up. It's still got some problems on different parts of the car. Um, But the problem is that if you bought a new car in Cuba, it would cost you more than $80,000, and maybe even more than that now, because I just saw the other day that the average car in the United States now costs 40,000. So maybe it's more than that at that time. So they've kept these classic cars. Many of them have turned into taxi cabs. If you notice that these are all kind of the same car, but you notice that some of them have little fins over the tops of the lights, and others have different grills. They keep patching them together, and the dirty little secret is that most of the drivetrains and the actual engines in these cars are Toyotas and Kias, because the original ones have all worn out. So most Cubans don't do that, because those cars, a gallon of gas nowadays is almost $5, which is way, way more than a Cuban can afford. Taxi cabs do it because they charge the tourists. But this is how most people get around, and they call these taxis as well. It's another way they get around is horse carts. Uh, the driver of this particular horse cart is a little bit of an anomaly. I didn't see very many Cubans that had that kind of weight that they were carrying around. And most cars are like this. You can see this is a privately owned car. You can see it's all bent and patched and kind of half fallen apart. And then during the late 80s and 90s, they had Russian cars, Ladas, and Eastern European cars. And so these are those kinds of cars that they had. I actually rented one of those, not rented, but I've got the services of a car and driver, and it was a Lada for 2.5 days. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But you can see on the interior of the back door, there's no upholstery. Now they're all kind of falling apart. This is our Lada, and this is Dwayne, my driver. And as you can see, we spent a lot of time trying to get the Lada to run, and we were able to do it every once in a while. But most of the time, he would drop me off someplace, and then he'd take the car off and get it fixed, and then pick me up like 4 or 5 hours later. But some of the cars, I mean, this is pretty amazing. I've never seen a Chrysler Imperial for quite a few years, much less rode in one. But again, these are all taxi cabs, not what you would normally ride in Cuba. If you're a Cuban, you'd mostly walk or ride in those jitneys. So I'm just about done here with how I work. You can see some of the things that I do at the beginning. Here's the back of the camera I was using, and I just wanted to talk about chimping. I rarely turn this screen on the back of the camera. And in fact, we call it chimping. Chimping is when you turning the back screen on to see what you got. And so I never do that. I never have the screen on. And I'll tell you tell you 4 reasons I don't chimp. And one is a battery for me will last me 2 days because the screen's not on. All the battery is doing is taking the images and putting them on the card. The second reason is, and this is pretty important, if you look at a picture and you see it and you say, wow, that's a pretty good picture, you quit taking pictures. You're satisfied. You're done. I want to keep taking pictures. I want to keep trying to think, well, what can I do to make it? How can I? So I never, even with a cell phone, I never look at the back. I'm not interested. I'm interested in trying to capture what's out there rather than worry about whether I got a good one, quote unquote. The third reason is a lot of times if you have a subject, and I do a lot, as you'll see, the subject wants to see the picture. soon as you show the subject a picture, the next time they're posing, they're ready, they're getting ready. So I don't want that to happen either. So they don't ever see what's on the back of the camera. And the fourth reason, which I think is probably the most important, is if you're looking at the back of the camera, your head's down. You're looking down. I want to look out. I want to see what's out there. And in fact, I want to learn the camera so well that I'll give you an example. It's like a piano player. When a person learns how to play the piano when they're like 7, 8 years old, they're learning notes, the black ones are the sharps and the blah, blah, blah. When concert pianists are playing, they're not thinking about notes. They're thinking about how they're going to interpret the music. They, they got this memorized. That notes are not a big deal for them. In fact, even if they miss a couple of notes, it's not a big deal because they're trying to get what they feel the composer wanted to show in this particular piece. As a photographer, you want to have that camera down so much that you're not thinking about the camera. You're not thinking about, you obviously have to think about exposure and things like that, but really what you want to do is be looking out and have the camera be second nature. After 3 million pictures, I think I got it down pretty good about not looking at the camera. It's something I do. So I get pictures like this. This is a street scene, many, many street scenes in Cuba like this. The hands to the face and the position of the other people. It kind of gives you a feeling of how they're living. And if I was, if I wasn't able to pick that camera up, well, I'll tell you what happened. I took 2 pictures and this lady over there kind of looks at me and says, "Are you taking our picture?" Well, by that time it was over with. I didn't take any more. I didn't need to. I had this one. So we can open up the mics if you want now, if you have some questions about that particular point. And I'll just show you what we're going to go into next so that you'll see. I do a number of themes. What I do is all that effort that I got in front to figure out what's going to be there. I know that there are certain themes I'm going to be doing when I'm on the assignment. Like the ballet we talked about, the kids go to school and blah, blah, blah. I have another theme on, tobacco, because I know tobacco is very important, as you saw, with what they export, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, we can open it up to questions now, or we can go on to some of the other themes that I do. No more of these screenshots of stuff from what they import and export, just pictures from now on.
I have a question. I'd like to know if you take notes on the subjects that you've photographed, and when you take the note, when you take the notes, and if you have to do research while you're there, if you don't know and it's something about the images that you've captured.
Right. Well, one of the things you want to do is that, and in fact, my whole career, and I just had a conversation with another photographer recently, and that my whole career has been a learning experience. I learn all kinds of things that I never thought about before, and I'll explain a couple of those in these themes. Obviously, these people are very dedicated to some of these things that they do. And so you're learning. And so I do take notes and I do take captions. And many of the captions that now that I take are either telephone numbers or websites so that I can find more information out from them after the fact. But on the other hand, and another idea, and I've done this a couple of times too, and on this particular assignment, is I go back the next day. I just don't think I'm happy with what I got. Um, I had a conversation with a photographer recently, and I said the biggest problem I have is I'm out there and I'm trying to take a picture. I'm just trying to take this picture. I know it's really important, and I can't take the picture. I just can't. I don't know what the deal. I just can't do it. And he looked at me, and he was always trying to get to the big time of photography, and never was able to make it. I was a little bit bitter about it. And he looked at me and he said, well, I can take a picture of anything. Well, yeah, you can, but he can't take that picture. I mean, those are the kind of pictures that I'm trying to take. I'm not satisfied with, you know, a picture of whatever it is. In fact, I generally consider those to be failures. Does that make any sense?
Yes. I'd like to ask a question too. When you go, what storylines do you have in mind? Do you have assignments, or do you end up picking the stories because of the visual impact?
That's a really good question. The way the geographic works is that um, sometimes you're assigned a story, sometimes you decide what the story is going to be. As a photographer, sometimes an outside person that's a biologist maybe suggests a story, and a writer and a photographer are assigned. When the writer and a photographer is assigned, generally a picture editor is assigned also, and a word editor. And we all get together and try to figure out what that story is going to be. Is it going to be a report on the place? Is it going to be, what is it? What are we trying to do? And so we put that together and we're all happy with that's what the story is going to be. And then we meet with the editor and his select group of about 10 uppity up guys and girls. And they listen to what you're going to do. And then the editor gives you a charge. The editor says, okay, here would be an example. We did a story on cocaine, and the photographer was very keen on, oh, I'm going to do a lab in the jungle of how they make cocaine in the jungle and blah, blah, blah. And the editor finally looked at him and he said, Jose, here's the deal. These are just photographs. I don't want you to get killed over this story. If you've got a feeling that you've got a problem going on and you got some real danger, leave. These pictures aren't worth it. Another time, a photographer and a writer said that they were going to do a story on coral. They're going to go to this place and they're going to go to that place and they're going to go around the world. And the editor finally said, well, look, pick about 5 places and go there, but you're not going around the world for this. You don't need to. Just do these. So they modify what your charge, and give you a charge, and then you go out and do it. And of course, the biggest problem you got is even though you've said what the story is going to be, you're looking at 30, 35 pages that are blank, and you're going to fill them up with some wonderful pictures, right? Good luck. I mean, that's the challenge. And that's why I say we're not just looking for a picture, we're looking for a picture that, first of all, is meaningful, and second of all, is one that the reader stops and goes, wow, this is pretty interesting, or God, I hate to be there, or whatever. But there's an emotional response to those photographs.
Thank you.
You want to go on?
Sure.
We got a couple more times we can stop. So if you're thinking of one, we can go from there. So you remember we talked about Leah and the lady that is a photographer in her own right. Well, I talked to her, 50 email exchanges, maybe 20 with her. I also had another lady that I was dealing with to get the cars all set up, another 20 emails back and forth before I got there. I talked to Alex Webb and and a couple of other people that had been to Cuba so that they could give me some information. But the cool part about Leah was that her daughter was going to the National Ballet School. And it's real hard to photograph ballet in Cuba. You can hire a ballerina to go around and stand in front of peeling paint walls, but you can't get into the National Ballet to photograph. You can't get into the ballet schools normally to photograph. They don't want you doing that. I mean, especially if you're an outsider. Maybe if you're a Cuban, you might be able to do it, but difficult. So I set it up so that she talked to her Lasis Vera talked to her daughter's teacher. Her daughter was a teenager, and her daughter's teacher said, "You can come to my practice and you can photograph for 40 minutes at my practice. Then that's all you can do because you can't go to a performance." So I said, "Well, there's a school, so that's pretty cool. Why not?" So I'll show you the pictures from that. All right, so this was one of the ballerinas warming up. You couldn't get out on the floor, so you had to stay back away from where they were. And remember, I told you I was using that kit lens. It's a zoom lens from, I don't know, what is it? I don't know, 28 to 105 or something like that. But anyway, I was able to make this picture because she just did this right in front of me. I said, well, that's pretty cool. And then they started to stand up at the bar like about 2 minutes later, and I was able to get this picture right after that. Same lens. The other interesting thing is I'm always looking for um, little surprises, things that help you out. I had no idea that the reflection on the floor was going to pick up their legs, which actually helped. Of course, the mirror I saw, of course. But here's another thing. If you notice down below, there's some, I don't know, the women had put some clothing or something down there. I don't move that stuff. That stuff is there. That stuff is there. I got to deal with it. Um, so then once they did the warm-ups, of course, then they put on their shoes. And so I had this, but there were about 9 of them putting on shoes. I had a choice. I could kind of run around and figure out which ones I wanted to get pictures of them putting on their shoes. And this one worked out because one of them had the shoe on already. And as you'll see, a lot of them, they run through these shoes pretty quick. So they get beat up pretty fast, especially when they're practicing. So then they went out and, they started to do their exercises and dancing. And the really cool part was their teacher went out and showed them what they were supposed to do. And I really like this picture because you saw every one of the kids looking at that teacher, trying to figure out what they're supposed to be doing. And I just thought that really made some sense to me because now you can see that it's a class. So then I tried to figure out, okay, so what can I do? Well, you do the double picture. That was always interesting. And of course, the lady's kicking her leg pretty high. And I looked for, pictures of expression. I'm still trying to figure out what other things, what can I do here? I mean, I'm looking at all this stuff. Well, I try to do a blur picture and show motion and movement with still photographs. I don't know how great and successful this was, but as you can see, it's an attempt to do that kind of a thing. And I had this lady who was all done with her class and she was watching the others dance. Well, you can see, by the way, how much area that I had to work in. It was not very much. And then finally, I had a picture that I thought it was what I was really trying to do with ballet. And as you know, that the ballet students have problems with eating disorders. and especially when they're this age. And I just felt that this picture kind of gave you a feeling of what they went through as students in the ballet situation. And in the last picture is the young kids. We're talking about the 8-year-old kids, and they're working on their assignments. Again, they're a member of the Pioneers. So every time I saw the red bandanas, I knew what that was because I had figured that out before I even got there. All right, so anyway, so that was the ballet stuff.
Just a quick question. Why are there no men in the pictures?
The men are in a different class, and they do dance together, but this is again for the working on technique. And so unfortunately, this particular class that I could get in was her daughter's class. And so that's why there weren't any men there doing the ballet as well. That's a good question.
But the steps that the men do are very different from the steps that the women do because their role is different. They lift the women,
lot of
and women
lifting.
get lifted, and so
Yeah.
on and so forth.
I actually, I have a photograph that I didn't show you here, but it's of them in class, like a regular class of a middle school class, the desks and everything, and the men and the women are together in the class, but they were not in that particular ballet class. Remember, I got 40 minutes.
Right.
Okay, so let's go on. We got questions in other places. Remember, now we're exporting a lot of tobacco, and this one area is a big area for tobacco, and it's called Vanales. And they have these, what they call mogages. They're like karst topography. And you'll see that's the area where tobacco grows. Now, this is very early in the morning, and you can see there's fog on the valley floor, and that really helps the tobacco production there. Great area, everybody knows of it, and it gives wonderful tobacco, which you'll see in a moment. But this is that particular area. They don't have any petrol for the tractors, so they're back to literally plowing and planting these. You can see the green there, here and there, planting the tobacco with oxen. So oxen have become very important for them in this in the production of tobacco now. There's a pair of oxen. They put these nets on there. They don't want the oxen to eat anything but what they want them to eat. So when they're out in the field and pulling carts and whatever, you'll see a couple carts being pulled. They use these nets to keep them from eating. This is interesting for me because, again, you say, well, what do you find out? Well, I never knew that the tobacco plant had a flower, and this is a flower for a tobacco plant. And then they pick them off all the time because they don't want these flowers to propagate the tobacco. They want to do it from their own seed. Again, see those oxen? They're just hauling those things all over the place. So I get this picture and I turn around and I see this guy doing this, and I'm trying to figure out what the hell he's doing. What is he doing? Well, this is the reason that you're always thinking about cutaways and other things. So when I saw him doing that, I put on a close-up lens and saw that this is what he was doing. He was actually sharpening a knife on a whetstone there. You can see his hands are pretty tough for picking tobacco. That's what he's doing. So how do they use these knives? Well, see, I have this picture, the next picture, and you can see in the man's mouth is that knife. He's just cut these tobacco things and these tobacco leaves, and he's putting them over these. You can see here again the knife, and look at the tough fingers that he has for doing this day after day. And then they put them on these racks. You can see him pulling them off and putting them on the racks. Again, tough work, that's for sure. So there's a picture with those magutis in the background and all of these racks out there starting to dry. You can see over on the left, they haven't cut the tobacco yet. And then these three racks. And then they take the racks and the tobacco, and they put them in these barns. That barn there is where that tobacco will go. Again, I'm telling a little story about how this tobacco is cut and managed. So when they go into the barn, here's what it looks like. So, the guy is standing there, putting the stuff on the rack, and he sees them starting to take his picture, and he says, "Do you want me to put my shirt on?" "Oh, man, you're who you are." So I get this picture of him, standing there with his bare chest, working on the tobacco. So now, after they're out of the barns, I'm still telling the story. They dry after a year. And then they take them, you can see down below, the guy down below, and he's tossing them up into the truck, and they're going to take the dried tobacco to make cigars. That's how it all works. And then finally, they're planting again, for the next time. And it's an amazing area, very very interesting area. You can see this is a vulture that's coming over that same area again. And of course, you get to smoke them, I guess. By the way, I had a friend, and the big deal was I had to bring back the cigars for him, of course. Cuban cigars are the best, he said. You got to bring them back. Okay. So anyway, so that's, I think, the tobacco part, so you can see how that worked. Notice that there's a little story that's going on, and hopefully what I try to do is to have every photograph contribute to that story. You don't see it. I'm trying not to have a whole lot of redundancy. I mean, obviously, if you saw the raw film, you'd see redundancy, of course. In fact, what's the old story about the difference between a professional and an amateur, right? The difference between a professional and an amateur photographer is that the professionals never show their bad ones. They got them, but they don't show them. All right, so let's go on. We don't have much here. Next theme is a music theme. Music, big deal in Cuba. You know all about Cuban music, and there's a couple of great movies. By Cooter made one called
Buena
Buena
Vista.
Vista Music Club down in Havana.
Buena
Anyway.
Vista Music.
Yeah, very, very good movie. But
Social club.
that's right. That's exactly right. And the music is there all over the place. It's one of the things that they've done. I mean, you know about Latin music with many genres, but this it's called a tenero. This gourd that they scrape on, that came from Native Americans that were in Cuba before the Spanish arrived, and they've adapted it now. So you know, I mean, cowbells and bongos, a lot of that going on. Um, and people just walking by on the street, okay? So they're dancing. I mean, they're just having a great time. I
That's
mean,
right.
they just start dancing. And they're down at the Malecon playing their music. So I say to the guy, you know, are you playing this for money? He said, no, no, I come down every night and just play. I just having a good time. Um, they're always dancing. This is a couple on the beach that, you know, big deal. Very emotional to the music for sure. Well, this guy over here on the left, I see him walking down the street, and he comes up to me and he says, I'm Orlando Blue. His name is Orlando Blue. That's the only English he spoke. So Orlando Blues tells me, I'm going to this bar and we're going to play music for money. I said, okay, in my group. So we go in, and obviously it's not very good for photography. So I got to figure out, I don't have a giant flash. I always have a flash with me, but it's, you know, one of those dedicated flashes for a camera, very small flash. So I got to figure out how I'm going to do that and figure out how I'm going to make pictures with the bar in the background so that you can see the people in the bar. And you know, finally I got one or two pictures, but I tell you what, this was a difficult time. And then Orlando finally gets done. He asked me if I wanted to hear a particular song. So I said, well, why don't you play Guantanamero? So he does. And then after he plays the song, he says, you've been such a good guy. I'll buy you a drink. I'm thinking, he's been doing this for 25 years, playing in bars just to make some money. And he's buying me a drink? Are you kidding? So, you know, I had a drink and so on. And after a while, a little later, I by the way, I don't pay for pictures. I just said, well, I'll buy you guys a drink too. So I did. So here's another example of using the flash to get some kind of motion feeling of what this is Orlando's guitar in his hand, of course. There's also modern jazz there. We're talking about modern jazz that you would hear in New York or Washington or San Francisco, any place. You'd hear this modern jazz. I mean, really good modern jazz. And I didn't have any press credentials or anything, so I just tried to find a seat that was fairly close up to the front where I could take pictures and use their lighting. So anyway, that kind of a music too. And then these are tourist bands. They play for tourists coming by, but they're all pretty good. You know, I mean, they're pretty good musicians, but that's the way they make a living. And this guy makes it with, you know, one of the typical with the, what do they call them, marimbas, or I don't, what do they call it anyway? The things you shake that make noise. Um, Also, if you notice, he's got
Maraca.
maracas. That's right. And you notice he's got. Uh, um, you'll see a number of them where they got, you know, from the U.S. or from someplace Europe, different uh, uh, clothing that they buy as well. And of course, they're really keen on being Cuban. And you see the flag and all that on their instruments and all over the place. But I will say that most of them do not like the regime at all. They like to see the regime change. They're really having problems. They don't have any money, and they don't eat well. It's not good. Okay, so that's some music. All right, we're moving on. We're almost done here. I got another theme. Portraits. Okay, I take a lot of portraits. Most of the time, if I ask them to take a portrait, or if they know I'm taking the portrait, I ask them to look right at the camera. And part of that reason is that I want people that are seeing the picture to know that they know I was there. Um, Sounds funny, but if it's in journalism, you know, and I don't want to pose them up and make people think that they didn't know I was there. Well, sometimes it's true, and you'll see a few of those, but a lot of times it's okay. I mean, I'm actually trying to show what they are like by taking a portrait. So I'll go through these fairly fast. This is another one of the guy actually that was sharpening the knife. There's a interesting picture. By the way, there's a bias in Cuba between light-skinned Cubans and dark-skinned Cubans. And the light-skinned Cubans, since the time of Batista and even now, kind of run the country. If you're a darker skin, you generally have a lesser job. This is a generality, but it's pretty much true around the country. This guy here, he was kind of on the outskirts of colonial Trinidad, and I thought, oh, he's doing this for the tourists, and so I took a picture of him. He didn't know I took this, but then I took some others of him, and he knew, of course, I was taking him. He never asked for money. I thought, well, I guess he's not a tourist kind of guy. By the way, I don't give anybody money. Um, just because I'm trying to protect the next photographer coming along behind me. That because if I give him money, then he's going to ask the next guy for money, and the next guy, and the next guy. So this is a French tourist, a nice time of day. This guy, it was his hat that was kind of the key part of this particular guy. Taking a picture of his family, and I just finally said, well, that the guy's better than the whole family. There's a Chinatown in Havana. I took quite a few pictures in the Chinatown, but I didn't have any. You didn't have any idea that it was a Chinese area, and so this lady was coming out. As you can see, she was wearing a Chinese jacket, and I just stopped her, and she didn't realize that I was using that circle behind her as kind of the key of what it was. A taxi driver, a steel worker taking a break for lunch. This lady thought I was taking a picture of her and didn't realize I was taking a picture of her fingernails. A kid, his dad was making a baseball bat with a machete, and I kept looking, and there's no way you could tell that he was making a baseball bat unless he told you. So I finally said, well, maybe the kid's more interesting than the baseball bat. Again, notice the Adidas. This is a portrait that's involved um, in another scene. It's just part of the scene. This is one where I could have taken a picture of him up against the wall, but I wanted to kind of give a feeling of where he was. Where's 265B? Well, there's kind of the street in the background of where it is. Notice he's from Seattle. Fortunately, the cat winked at me at the right time. And the colors here made quite a bit of difference. I'm very lucky here that the smoke came up underneath his hat and made more of an interesting picture than just him standing there looking at you. there's fighting cocks are really big in Cuba. They fight these chickens. And I wanted to take a picture of this guy with his fighting cock, and I finally figured out it was actually taking a picture of a spider in a spider web instead of a chicken. So anyway, those are some portraits that I took. Again, you know, you got to understand I was not there very long, so tried to do as well as I could for the time I was in these
So
areas.
I do have a question
Go ahead.
about when you do take these portraits of folks, do they ever ask to see the pictures? Do you show them at all to them?
Not usually. It depends on the country.
Yeah.
Not so much in Cuba. They just accepted that I was taking a picture, but they not often did they ever ask to see it, because I never
Do
look.
they,
Remember? I'm not looking.
right, I got that part of it, but I was
Yeah.
just wondering, I mean, because with, you know, cell phones and their cameras being so ubiquitous everywhere that, you know, everybody asks, well, show me the picture.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And,
Well, here's the
you know,
interesting thing about cell phones is that since everybody's taking pictures every day of everybody, it used to be, you know, 15 years ago, I'd show up with a big camera and everybody go, oh, God. Now,
yeah,
people have their picture taken every day. They don't even care. It's not a big
yeah,
deal anymore.
Mhm.
So even if you got a camera, the only thing they would say is, you know, are you a professional? Or are
mhm.
you with a news organization or something like that? I get that every once in a while.
Sure.
What about the portraits of children? Do you speak with
Oh,
any?
that's another thing. That's a very good point. Portraits of children, I always ask the parents if it's okay to take a picture of the kids.
Yeah.
Because of the way the world works nowadays, they don't know, you know, what's happening here. So I
Yeah.
do with the kids. I do ask the parents if it's okay if I take a picture of their kids. That's
So at
very
that point, do you explain that you're a photojournalist at that point?
I'm sorry.
Do you explain that you are a photojournalist to the parent at that point?
Yes, I do. Anybody that asks, I tell them, I'm very honest. I tell them, you know, here's what I'm doing. Like for
Yeah,
instance, like today or yesterday, I was out with my camera. I'm pretty much out every day with it, and I wasn't working for anybody. And if somebody says, you know, are you working for somebody? I say, no, I'm working for myself. Or, you
yeah.
know, you got to be very, you know, direct or what you do. And I would never use a press pass to take pictures that I wasn't on assignment for that particular place.
Got it. Thanks.
So
Okay.
what year were you in Cuba and took these pictures? I think
Oh,
I
it
missed
was
that.
just before the pandemic. I came back and the pandemic shut everybody down.
So
2020.
2019,
2020.
2020. Well, I
Mhm.
must say, I loved your tobacco pictures, but I hate tobacco. So
Right.
it was really sad that, you know, tobacco creates such horrible, horrible health conditions. But I
Yep.
thought all your photos were beautiful, and especially the man with the knife, the portrait of him. But the whole series was just beautiful.
Well, like I said, you know, I mean, what I there's uh, not too far. Well, down in Florida, there's a place called uh, Ybor City, which has a bunch of Cubans down there that are rolling cigars and cutting cigars, and that's a really good place to talk to them about, you know, the drawbacks of tobacco. I understand what you're talking about.
I'd like to ask a question about what was the actual title of the article that was published and what themes did it include? And what did it not
It
include?
included much more than what you're seeing here and much less. So a lot of these portraits and things didn't make it, but then you'll see some other pictures that did that rounded out the story. And it was called Slice of Life is what it was called because I couldn't cover the whole country.
Thank you. So it was extremely broad
Right.
focus.
Okay, so
Thank
this is
you.
a Colonial Trinidad. We'll go through this pretty quick. I'll just show you something. This particular church, it's not, and it doesn't function anymore as a church. But I was looking for an iconic way to talk about colonial Trinidad, colonial Trinidad. So I don't use bursts on the camera very much. I kind of wait it out and try to figure out what I'm going to do. So I was waiting for somebody to come up the street. I know the light was right, blah, 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 and a guy with a horse there and all. And all of a sudden, this guy comes up with this bunch of rebar over his shoulder. And of course, I just picked the time when he was in that one spot of light where he got the shadow on the wall. So I'm always looking for those things. Those are the little pluses that help out. Again, I took a whole bunch of pictures of this lady doing needlepoint or something out her door, see over on the right. So I'm taking pictures of her and I said, yeah, she's looking down and all of a sudden this guy comes in to get in the other door down the street and it makes a much more interesting picture of having both of them in the picture rather than just the one. Gives kind of a more sense of place. They were waiting to take um, pig slop in the back of their vehicle. Interesting in the colonial Trinidad, the gutters are in the middle of the street, so and not up on the side by the doors, but down in the middle of the street, so all the water runs down. So I'm able to get a reflection, and then that this is just kind of in the street. It's kind of early morning. Here's another one where these kids were coming down the street in the little cart. I was looking at that, but then all of a sudden I realized there's this lady that's going in the doorway over on the right, and another little bonus part of the picture that that helps it out, makes it more than what you thought it was going to be. Same here, guy coming down the street in his horse, a really interesting colored building behind him, and then the two guys up leaning against the telephone pole up there, kind of helps the picture out a lot, in my mind anyway. Again, in the morning, kind of getting things all together. You got to figure out where you're going to be and what, she's coming with another bucket of water. That was her second bucket of water. Where you want to be to make the picture. I waited here for an awful long time. I saw these two girls talking in the doorway, and then all of a sudden this guy comes, and it really helps the picture out to have that second person. So there's a church that doesn't exist anymore. It's just the bell tower and the bones of the church. But the guys are playing soccer out in front of the church, what helps it out. It helps the picture quite a bit to have those going on. And then this, what really helped out, so you can see exactly what's going to happen here. And looking, working for shadows and stuff on the walls and things. I'm always trying to look. I'm looking for something that may happen, and I've got to get ready, and then it happens. So anyway, so that's Colonial Tovar. Did I say Tovar? There's another Colonial Tovar. I was at Colonial Trinidad.
Could you say something about captions? Because with the other themes, I could see that it wouldn't be too difficult to make some sort of informative caption. But with these, it's kind of hard. How do you formulate captions?
Big one for me is anticipation. What's going to happen? Like it's if you know the game well enough, if you're playing, if it's the game, then you're in the right place at the right time. And you know, I remember once I was at a National Football League game and I was in the end zone because I figured there was going to be a pass play. Well, it was a run. The guy came right at me, ran right by me. And my dad was watching a game up in Illinois, and he said, "Mom, come on in. You can see Bob's standing there with this guy, runs right by him." So, you know, I kind of knew that that kind of a thing was going to happen. And so you try to be in the right place at the right time. But, you know, as pointed out, you fail a lot of times. You really fail a lot of times. A lot of times angles and things, you know, you think you got it figured out. Well, you don't. So,
What I meant is a picture can be kind of like a Rorschach test. I mean, if it doesn't have a caption, especially if it's from some exotic spot or
mhm.
people, the person looking at it needs some sort of orientation as to why it, why it's there in the public.
Right. Well, this picture here is a pretty good example. I'll tell you, I waited maybe, I don't know, 40 minutes or so for this to happen, where um, the soccer players were in the right place at the right time. Because I knew if I just took a picture of the church and that red tree, it's going to be just a picture of a church and a red tree. So I had to try to figure out, you know, how to get this pickup soccer game to work. Of course, one of the problems you got is that, well, where's the ball? Well, you got to have the ball in the picture, and I mean, anyway, so you know, you work on those kinds of things, so it isn't just kind of a straightforward picture. Exactly.
What did you title the picture?
Title of which picture? Oh,
That picture. Did you title the photo? Or did the
no, I don't title them. The caption writers and people, you know, they're picking up on the fact that that's a 16th century church and it's now a hulk and it's been there a long time. And they mention the soccer players, but that's all. That there's a soccer game on with the locals.
So Bob, you talk a lot about angle and content and waiting for the right people to arrive and that kind of thing. What do you do about point of focus and exposure?
Yeah, focus and exposure again. If you ask me what the exposure of this particular picture was, I couldn't tell you. I mean, I know I have to have a decent enough shutter speed. You know, I know that I have to have a decent enough shutter speed. But one of the other reasons that this picture it has a lot of sharpness is that I didn't want that house in the background to be prevalent. I didn't want that to be sharp at all. So I got a limited depth of field here, and that allows the picture to stop the action a lot more than it would have if I, you know. But it's kind of like all this stuff's a work in progress for me. I don't know. I'm not a real technical guy, unfortunately. I'm always looking for the, you know, for the what's going to happen. So the technique is sort of second nature, I guess, at this point.
So are you are you working your shutter speed, apertures, and point of
Yeah,
focus
I shoot on
manually?
manual.
Yeah.
So
Okay. All right.
I'm always looking at the shutter speeds and yeah, sure. So, you know, I mean, I'm watching this and I said, well, look, I got to have a shutter speed that's going to have to be at least like a 500th of a second. And I want to blur that background back there. So probably need it to be like, you know, f5.6 or something like that. And then I got a zoom lens and I got to figure out what I'm going to do there too as well. Because if I'm in too close with the zoom lens, then the lot isn't going to be sharp.
So I guess, Bob, the other aspect of the technique then is sort of, I'm assuming you sort of want to be like a fly on the wall in some instances where you are.
Yes, I do. Yeah,
You
they don't,
obviously,
obviously, they don't know I'm here. I mean, I guess they know, but they don't know. They're playing the game. They're
right,
not, they're not,
right.
I'm there long enough that I don't say anything to them. And a lot of times I got the camera up to my eye, so they don't even see me, they see a camera.
Right. That was the thing I was getting at was that because you're in a position for a good enough length of time. It's not a drive-by type of a photograph. You were there for a pretty good length of time to get what you want.
Yeah, well, and I mean, to be honest, there's a lot of times I don't get it. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm trying, but I mean, you have to understand is that I'm out there on this particular story. I'm out there for 12 hours a day, and I'm
Right.
not sitting in a restaurant eating lunch. I'm doing something else, and I mean, I'm not, I'm not, I'm photographing pretty much all the time.
Well, it sounds like you'd be eating lunch. You might be photographing the kitchen staff too. So, I mean,
Yeah. All right, so let's go on to this is a very interesting one here. There are no department stores in Cuba at all, none. So there's no supermarkets. So everything is sold one-off. So we'll go through some of the things that are done one-off, and you'll see very interesting how they work and how interesting it is. All right, so here's the lady who just bought some bread and some eggs at one store, and she passes this guy who's trying to sell her fish that he caught that morning. And he was having a hard time selling her the fish because he wanted to sell her all of them. He didn't want to sell her two of them. And so she was having problems with that. So because of the exchange, I had time to take 2 or 3 pictures of what was happening. And also I picked up on the fact that that M26-7, that's Castro's day that they landed in Cuba for the revolution, and that's all over the place. But you can see that, back and forth between them. That's very important for me to do that. Now, here's a guy buying just bread. That's all she's selling is bread. I like this picture. They didn't like it so much, but I liked it because he was using pesos to pay for the bread. So one of those big rolls of bread would cost like 20 cents. This is very interesting. I just happened on this. You don't see this very often in Cuba. You don't get meat. They don't get meat at all. And is this a butcher shop? Well, sort of, I guess. They're just carving up the meat. And by noon, that meat's all gone. They sold every bit of it. Not exactly the most sanitary conditions. Here's the eggs. They're selling eggs. They also sell all kinds of stuff on the street. Onions. You'll see they also sell, this is actually a cart. And he's selling all his fruit off of his cart, and they take it all the way down the street, take it to the actual buyers rather than having them have to go to stores. There's a guy selling flowers off his bicycle. Here's a guy that's just selling, I think those are tomatoes and bananas in the background, and looks like avocados up in the foreground.
Papayas, no?
Oh, that's right. They are papayas. They are papayas, exactly. I walked over the corner and I looked into that shop and I went, okay. I mean, I didn't paint that on the wall, but okay, I'm ready. This is I was waiting for a bus, and when this guy was selling like pop-up sandwiches at the bus station, he's looking at his phone, and the guy walks by. What's really interesting is that if you look on the left, the shadow is the guy with the phone and then the guy walking. And if you look on the right, it's the guy walking and then the guy with the shadow. It's reverse of what you actually see on the wall. How long do you think I had to wait for that? Quite a while. This is a, kind of a shot of mannequins. The whole idea here is to show that there really isn't any real retail shops that you can buy anything at. But they're very fashion conscious. If you notice that the guy with the motorcycle has got a shirt on with LeBron James's current team, and it isn't like an old team. That's his current team. And the guy giving a haircut, that's okay, but this is probably a little more interesting as a beauty shop right out in the open. And again, they can read everything. They're all literate, so that she's reading a book and a lady's looking up at I don't know what you'd call it, a beauty poster that's on the wall. So those are small scale stores. And then I'll just run through a couple of pictures and then we can ask a lot more questions, because these last pictures are about 5 or 6 of them that just show pictures that didn't fit into any of these particular themes, but I thought were pretty good pictures for like an 8-day trip. This one here, she bought those flowers from the guy selling them out of the bicycle. Kind of interesting. We got all the car and the phone booth thing and everything, all matching colors. I mean, glad that he wore a yellow shirt that day. This on the Malecone fishing. I like this picture because if you look from the left to the right, it's exactly what's happening when they fish. The guy's down there trying to figure out what to do, and the next guy is pulling up the thing, the next guy's baiting a hook, the next guy getting ready, and the last guy's fishing. And it all kind of worked. A lot of this going on, carts and horses. I like the fact that the motorcycle is coming by just as the horses are going by. This is in that Chinese place. I got like 10, 12 really pretty good pictures in that Chinese church area. And he's doing stretches in the morning. That's on the Malecone. That's where all the casinos were, down on that other side behind him. Kid fishing, and you can see 2 more in the back. I'm throwing nets out. That's obviously at sundown. That's pretty much one of the last pictures I took before I came back. So if you're looking for my website, there's a QR code for it. And if you want to see a whole bunch of pictures on Cuba, different ones than you saw there, some different than the ones you saw, and some obviously the same. there's a whole show that goes on there too as well. And you can go to my website and click on my YouTube thing, and it'll take you right to my my what do you call it? My what do you call a YouTube? Um,
Channel,
what's that?
YouTube channel?
It's that's the
Or
show, but
station.
it's also I've got all kinds of shows. I got shows on Tanzania, animals. I got shows on well many different kinds of things. So it's but there's where the Cuba one is too as well. So anyway, let's ask some more questions or answer some more questions if you have the time. Be happy to do it.
I have a question. Actually, I have several questions. The first you mentioned with the gentleman that was sharpening his knife, you called it a cutaway. What does
Yeah,
that?
well, actually, it's a film term. If you're looking at a film, right, and you see, some something that's happening that they're working with their hands or whatever, you'll see all of a sudden there'll be a cut from the major scene down to what their hands are doing. They're called cutaways, so that it helps helps the viewer. A good one is commercials. Take a look at any commercial, a beer commercial, right? You're on the mountain, now you're in a bar, now you're doing, and then pretty soon you're down and there's a cutaway to the beer can.
Like a
So
detail shot.
that's how they work. And it's just important to have those kinds of things. If you realize nobody's going to understand what the heck this guy's doing. So that's why they're cutaways. That's what they call them anyway.
And my second question is, do you send when you're out on assignment like this, do you send everything back?
Yes.
That to
Yes.
you and they edit and come up with.
You send a hard drive with the raw film, the raw files. You don't even make JPEGs out of them, and they don't want you to. Sometimes you make a JPEG to show them what you're kind of looking at, but for the most part, you're sending them the raw files, and then they pick from there.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So you do no pruning at that point? Everything goes to them and they see everything you shot?
Yep, that's right.
Sounds like you're not that involved in post-production either then. They do all the
No,
post-production.
you see, you're sending them like when you're taking them. You're not
Yeah.
waiting until you get back.
Right.
And so when you get back, then you go through them. A lot of times I haven't seen some of the stuff until I get back.
Right.
A lot, actually, that was more in the analog days. Nowadays, you might as well roll through the JPEGs to see if you're going to have to stay there the next day. That's a nice thing that you can do now. You can say, "Uh-oh, I didn't get it. I'm going to have to stay around a little bit here, make sure I get it." But in the analog days, you never
That's true.
knew. You'd be gone. You'd be gone for like 6 weeks, and you'd come back. Sometimes you call up the picture editor. It was very, very funny. You'd say, "So, how'd you like the guy, the kid swinging upside down on a rope over the river and falling in?
Yeah.
How'd you like that picture?" And the picture editor would say, "Which picture was that?" And you say, never
What are you
mind.
What are you
Never mind.
talking about?
And then, you realize it wasn't worth
Oops.
anything because, oops, nope, never mind.
Yeah.
But anyway, nowadays, the nice part about being able to look at the JPEGs is that, at least you know what you got. A lot of it you can't change because it's over with. But sometimes you can. You can say, well, maybe I ought to go back and photographing that tobacco barn again because I didn't get anything there.
Do you chimp at night?
No, I don't chimp. I'm looking at the JPEGs on my computer. Don't forget, I'm shooting, more than one. Even though I'm shooting um, gigabyte. Did I say gigabyte? What do you call them? The cards are gigapixel cards.
Right.
75, 125 gigapixel cards. I'm downloading them every night, by the way. And the reason I'm downloading them every night, getting them on those hard drives, is that I'm going to be wanting to use the card again.
So it sounds like then you shoot RAW and JPEG simultaneously.
That's correct. I do.
Yeah.
Yep. And the reason is that I'll just quickly look through the JPEGs, and the RAWs.
Yeah.
It's going to be too much trouble. It's a lot of files.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of downloading.
Yeah, well, I'm going to download those anyway because I'm sending back the hard drive to them. But
Sure.
that's a
But it
lot.
saves you time to just for viewing purposes. It takes less time for the JPEG.
Well, what I generally do is I come back from the sun goes down, and I'm kind of done with the photography for that day, and I haven't eaten dinner yet. So what I do is I get back, got my laptop there. I'm downloading all of the imagery to the laptop while I'm going to dinner. Right? Come back from dinner, and that's all done. And then what I do is I take that and download that to the hard drive while I'm going to sleep at night. But I've already got the stuff on the hard drive on the computer so I can see it.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Absolutely. Nice.
I'll
Do you
tell you.
ever have, oh, sorry.
I'm some things I'm shooting at dawn, and I don't see them until 6 o'clock at night. I don't see the pictures.
Do you ever have a temptation to edit your pictures?
I always have a temptation to edit them. The nice part is that when I get back to the picture editor who's looking at those, I have the ability to pick any picture that I want that I think that they missed and put it in. Not to the story, but to put it into the coverage that the editors are going to view.
I
Oh,
see.
that's sweet.
Yeah, I mean, I have that right to do that. And, I mean, it depends. Sometimes, I'm hot on a picture. Well, here's a good example. There's, I was also the director of design as Linda pointed out at the beginning. So Alex Webb, who's a terrific photographer, comes back from Paraguay, and he's got like 6 terrific street scenes. If you know his photography, you know that he just has wonderful street scenes of people that just happen to be the right place and all that.
Mhm.
So I say to him, I'm putting the story together for the magazine, and I say to him, look, you got 6 of these, at least 6 or 7. We can only publish 3. I don't care which 3. You tell me which 3 you like the best out of the 7, and we'll publish those.
Mhm.
So he's happy because he gets the 3 that he thinks are the best. And it doesn't make any difference to me. They're all pretty much the same kind of a photograph, but we can't publish any more than 3.
I noticed some of the pictures that we saw are cropped. So,
Yes.
I mean, who does that cropping? You
Well,
or-
for this particular point, I did, but I will say they're not that cropped. I mean, let's see, maybe, I'll give you an example. There may be a picture of the ballet thing where they're dancing or whatever, and there's the fingers of another ballerina coming in from the side, and just the fingers. And that I may have taken those fingers off, but for the most part, I'll tell you, you have to take a look at my raw pictures. And the picture editors hate it when they're not full frame. They don't like it when you got all this cropping going on. It's just, and the same with, taking things out or not, you don't do that. And, you crop them out maybe, but you don't take them out of the picture. You got something in the picture that's in it, that's got it in it. Well, I appreciate your patience. We've been at it for a while here. I'm sorry that I ran over a little bit, but it's been very interesting to talk to you all.
No, thank you so much for your time, Bob.
Well, you're welcome. Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
mean, I enjoy, talking to people. As I say before, I say to my partner, I say, look, one of the nice things about going with you on some of these, she was not with me on this one, but on some of them is that, when something's happening that's pretty cool, we can share it together. And one real nice thing is that then I can share it with, 4 million other people, which is pretty nice.
I enjoyed seeing your view of Cuba, and it's particularly the tobacco and the ballet. I really loved how you captured those.
Mm.
Well, thank you very much. Like I said, I mean, the it's a career where I didn't have to think that I was working for a living.
It's kind.